Well, hello and welcome back, and good afternoon, Michael.
And good afternoon to you, Richard.
It's the coronation is getting closer and closer. It's getting quite exciting out in the world, isn't it? I'm sure that you probably like me were on tender hooks earlier this week to see who the Lord Great Steward and the Lord High Constables of England and Scotland were, along with the rest of the country.
No, I mean, I can see your screen is possibly shaking at my end, at least the way
Oh
you are.
yes,
You're obviously bouncing up and down with excitement on the subject.
yes, indeed, yes, indeed. So yes, I think as we get closer and closer, obviously we're finding out more and more about what's going to happen exactly on the day. But one of the earlier things we found out about was what the Coronation Bible would look like, and they've published pictures with the Archbishop of Canterbury in the Bible, haven't they, Michael?
Yes, there were some quite good pictures at Lambeth Palace. It's from Oxford University Press, and it's quite attractively bound. I haven't managed to find out yet whether it includes the Apocrypha inside. Traditionally, coronation Bibles should include the Apocrypha to be a full Church of England sort of reading Bible. When they were crowning Edward VII, I know it was supposed to be presented by the British and Foreign Bible Society, but they had to withdraw the offer because there was an insistence from Lambeth Palace that it must include the Apocrypha, and that
Ah.
particular society wasn't allowed to do this. And then, as a result, the custom grew up of the ancient universities, Oxford and Cambridge, presenting a Bible at the coronation. The the only exception was George VI, but that's largely because they had to rush through a small volume at the last minute. Because it had to be rushed through, they left out the Apocrypha. There was a rather more ornate volume, but it was just too heavy for the Bishop of Norwich to carry in procession. So that just simply stayed on the altar afterwards.
So what happened before Oxford and Cambridge University Press started printing the Bibles? What happened in earlier centuries?
They've always been produced, I think, by the university presses, but not officially presented by them.
Right.
It's really hard to discern what happened to begin with, but they probably borrowed the Bible from the Chapel Royal, probably in Whitehall. The whole ceremony goes back to 1689 and William and Mary. And given how important the introduction of the presentation of the Bible was in 1689, it's frustrating we know so little about it. Given there was a service of morning prayer in the Chapel Royal before going to Westminster Abbey, it's reasonable to assume they took one of the sumptuously bound Bibles from the Chapel Royal over to the Abbey. We certainly know that was the case for Charles II. In his day, they needed the Bible to swear the oath on. The actual presentation of the Bible, as I say, doesn't come in until 1689.
Yeah, I was going to say. So obviously, this presentation in 1689, but I assume the Bible's been there from the beginning in various for various different uses, including reading at the service.
Well, there's certainly always been readings from the Bible. There's been a set coronation gospel for 1,000+ years. I mean, I think it goes back to King Edgar. I'm open to correction on that, but they've had, the reading from Matthew 12, verse 15 onwards, which is the one about render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's and to God the things which are God's, which you can see, I suppose, sets out the parameters of royal rule and what's appropriate. But the other main reason for having a copy of the scriptures there is for swearing the oath on. But doesn't seem to have been any precedent for any particular book of the Gospels being used for swearing the oath on. I mean, there is an Anglo-Saxon volume known as the Coronation Gospels, but I don't think it was actually ever used. The one documented occasion when somebody tried to get it used was for Charles I, but he spurned the offer. We're told that the royal barge rode on and spurned the antiquary who was holding up the Gospels, wanting them to be used at the Abbey.
And I seem to remember somewhere in the back of my mind that the ritual of swearing the oath had got quite elaborate by the late Middle Ages, and that Edward VI made a point of putting his hands on the Gospels. Have I remembered that correctly?
You are correct, but it had got more elaborate. They'd been using relics on the altar and they'd also been making the oath over the Blessed Sacrament. We think actually that Edward VI, Protestant as he was, still made the oath over the Blessed Sacrament, but then, as you rightly say, made a big pointed gesture about also doing it over the Gospels, and clearly indicated that, you know, the Reformation was on its way in England.
And there's that story, isn't there, of is it the coronation procession of Queen Elizabeth, and is it the Lord Mayor of London? I might have made that up. Presenting a Bible on her route to the Abbey.
That's correct. Elizabeth I was given a Bible on her way to the Abbey, and she stopped and kissed it on the outside and said words to the effect of how much it meant to her. There was some suggestion actually at the 1953 coronation that Elizabeth II should respond to the presentation of the Bible by quoting those words of Elizabeth I, but that was never actually taken up. It'll be interesting to know at this coming coronation whether the King responds to the presentation when it happens, which I believe will happen again at the hands of the moderator of the Church of Scotland.
Yes, because that was an innovation, of course, in 1953. And I suppose we should just mention the words that were said at that presentation. I will try to remember them. I haven't got a copy here. Here is wisdom. This is the royal law. These are the lively oracles of faith, or words to that effect. And I suppose one thing about 1953 is, or was, that it got moved right to the beginning of the ceremony, near to the recognition and the oaths, almost that, you know, here was the foundation of the whole service. At the center of it all was the Bible.
That was very much the idea that you could say the whole service was based on the scriptures.
Yes.
And that was a point which I think was received quite well by the wider church, you know, I mean, by nonconformists as well, to make the important point about the scriptures being at the heart of it.
Yes, and at the heart of it, the gospel reading. It'll be interesting to see this time if we do or do not have a sermon, because we haven't had a sermon for the last two coronations, I think it was, although it was traditional. So it'll be interesting to see whether that is still cut from the service because of time, or whether, I think possibly, maybe Justin Welby, Archbishop of Canterbury, might want to actually have at least a few words spoken at that point, maybe. But so it'll be interesting to see. And I suppose, you know, a gospel reading, and I suppose it's important to say that the whole rite of coronation comes in the context of a service of a Holy Communion of the Church of England. And perhaps that might be something that we can talk about on another occasion, Michael.
Yeah, no, I will look forward to it.
Good. Well, I hope you can join us for another one of our conversations, and thanks for coming in.